Okay, so thanks very much for joining me today on this webinar about building a coherent leadership culture in your organization. So for those of us who are in Singapore or in a similar time zone, we intended for you to be able to have your lunch while listening to this webinar. So it is mostly an information sharing session. You can sit back, munch away, and listen. But there's one thing I'd like you to help me with before digging into your lunch. And that is, can you please introduce yourself briefly in the chat? I really like to get to know some of the people that are here, get to know who are the people I'm talking to. And so in the chat, if you don't mind putting in your name, company, job role, and what are you having for lunch today? Okay, so I've got some people, you've got Jeremiah Lee. Okay, so name, company, job role, and what are you having for lunch today? Just so that, you know, everybody else can drool at your beautiful lunch that you're having. Okay, Alvin, learning manager, biscuits. Ayo, so sad, Alvin. I hope they're wonderful biscuits. Irene from Afin Huang, having an apple for lunch. Very healthy, very healthy. Jamie from CTBC, cool. Rachel, general manager, international SOS, leftovers from dinner. Okay, Jean Lee from Daimler having noodles. Jeremy, Golden Equator, on a diet. Jeremy, that means no lunch, huh? Brandon, HR manager, waiting for chicken rice. Somebody tapao for you. Very good. Kanye K, Kanye K. Hopefully I haven't butchered that too much. I'm very sorry if I did. Fresh salad. Okay, Jeremiah, we're back now. HMI, operations learning, skipping lunch for diet. Okay, a few people are doing this. I had a beautiful what's this, roast beef on sourdough bread, which was very nice. Okay, Dion, beef on rice. Well, I had beef on bread. Jennifer, fish soup. Audrey, account manager, you're having Subway. Very good. Cool. So, thank you very much for helping me out with that. Now you can enjoy your lunch. Rest assured, I'm not going to call on you to answer any more questions or do any more typing. Those of us having Subway. Yong Sing, senior manager, MINDEF, having chicken rice. Wonderful. Okay. Got one person just in the waiting room. Jen. I think I saw Jen before. Maybe she dropped out and came back. So I'm not going to ask you any more questions. You can use both hands to hold your Subway and eat your chicken rice. And you can stuff your mouth full. Don't worry. No more. Don't have to talk anymore. Susan Chia, VP HR Oakwood. Okay. Noodles. Very good. Okay. So we're intending for this session to take about 1 hour. We'll have time for Q&A at the end of it, like Rachel said before. So during the session, if you've got questions, just post them in the chat and we'll deal with them at the end. So thank you for introducing yourself. My turn now. I'm Kevin. Like sometimes Rachel is very, very complimentary when she writes my introduction. Makes me a bit shy. So I'm managing partner for leadership solutions at Momenta. Momenta has been helping organizations build their most valuable asset, their people, for over 16 years. We're based in Singapore. And we're also operating in 10 other countries in the Asia Pacific region. So personally, I've lived in 4 countries. So I'll just, oh, hang on, sorry, I messed up my screen share there. Here we go. Personally, I've lived in 4 countries. I was born in Singapore. I lived in New Zealand for 12 years, and then Thailand for 6 years, Malaysia 4 years. And on 5th of November, just over a month from now, I'll be moving back to my home truly, where I know I must be, where my dreams wait for me, where the river always flows. So Kit Chan just has the same surname. Obviously, I didn't share the musical genes. So I'm a husband of 1 wife and father to 2 lovely girls. And it's my honor to try to be the best leader of this little organization that I can. Personally, I've been involved with various forms of leadership and leadership development for over 20 years across multiple countries, like I said before, languages, cultures, and types of organizations. from MNCs. I think quite a few of us here, looking at the companies that you're from, are from MNCs, a few SMEs, a few smaller companies. And also I've spent significant amounts of my time with volunteer not-for-profit organizations. So for most of us at Momenta, from the big boss, who's an incredible man called Carl Tong, to little old me, that final sector of volunteer not-for-profit is an area of great passion for us. Carl is serving as a volunteer leader in his church, is on a few boards of not-for-profit organizations. I also spend significant amounts of my time with an international not-for-profit. But why am I sharing all this with you? Because actually, most of what I have learned in leadership, I've learned from working with volunteers. Broadly speaking, there are 5 levers of power. You may have heard this. French and Raven, a couple of people who wrote this actually in the 1960s, and it's been the foundation of many other trainings, books on persuasion, influence, leadership, etc. So colloquially, the 5 levers, ways that people can exert influence on somebody else are carrot, stick, positional power, expert power. You will do something I tell you because I appear to be clever, to be smart, to be an expert. And referent power. Referent power talks about you're being able to influence someone because they like you, which is why Nespresso pays George Clooney the big bucks to be their face. He doesn't know, I don't know how much he knows about coffee, but he has influence over the consumer because a lot of people like him. So that's George Clooney. I was trying to guess how many men and how many women we'd have on this webinar. So I chose George Clooney because I thought maybe we'd have more women than men. Maybe for the next webinar, I'll choose Angelina Jolie or something. I don't know. Okay, so now there are these 5 levers of power which are available to us. And the tragedy is that in many commercial organizations, none of which are represented here, I'm sure, leaders rely on positional power and the ability to wield the stick or offer the carrot. But in the volunteer, the not-for-profit sector, when you don't pay people, you cannot give them a bonus or pay rise. When people are not relying on you for their rice bowl, you can't threaten to fire them. It's all fine when things are fun and it's going well. But when you need people to do something difficult, some sacrificial things, in the not-for-profit sector, the only lever you have is good leadership. And that's where I think we've learned a lot of our principles about leadership. So let's start at the core of things. Simon Sinek, which is quite a well-known speaker today, has published an excellent book in 2009 titled Start With Why. Because the why informs the how, and that leads to the what. So too many people start with a list of things. Too many people start with a list of things to do, the what, and never go deeper than that. Some realize that efficiently ordering and coordinating your work requires strategy. So strategy deals with the how. But before that, we need to ask the why. Why are you doing something in the first place? I once read a quote that went something like this. I climbed the ladder of success only to find it was leaning against the wrong wall. So with leadership, the core philosophical anchor to our leadership framework is this question. Am I here to be served or to serve? Do we see the people on our team as people who are there to serve us? Or are we there to serve their needs? This can be applied to almost any level of leadership. If you're leading a family, is your family there to serve you? Are you there to serve them? If you're leading a small team, if you're leading a company, if you're leading a country, is the country there to serve you, make you rich? Or are you in a position of leadership in order to serve your country? Now, servant leadership is not about the CEO or the MD sweeping floors and making coffee. Now, there's no problem with them doing that if that is what best serves their people. What servant leadership is is where a leader adjusts their leadership priorities, activities, and styles based on how they can best serve their people. Let me repeat that. Servant leadership is adapting your priorities, your decisions, and your style based on the needs of the people that you lead. Now, this is so key because it flips the traditional thinking about leadership on its head. Now, being a servant leader does not mean you're being weak or being a pushover. In fact, it takes more strength and insight to be the leader that your people need rather than simply one that they want. A servant leader realizes that their job is to enable people to succeed, not the other way around. The point is that you help your people succeed, not for your people to help you succeed. And it's a small change in mindset, but very, very crucial. This can mean holding people accountable for their actions or behavior, because one underperforming person can adversely affect everyone else in a team. So if you're serving the whole team, sometimes it means pulling up one person and going, my friend, you are letting everybody else down. Sometimes the servant leader has to push the team's performance because if they don't pull up their socks, maybe they'll be out of a job next year. They just don't see that yet. They want to hang out and lepak and relax now, but they don't realize what they need is to perform well so that they will continue to have a job next year. Sometimes you have to make the difficult decision to fire someone, but it is for the benefit of the rest of the team. And often it is for the benefit of the fired person as well. So in designing a leadership formation ecosystem, the key is the why. And this has serious implications on the how. In fact, I once fired someone and after the meeting, they shook my hand. And funnily enough, later on, their mother came and shook my hand as well and thanked me for it. At the time, it wasn't easy, but something had to be done and they benefited from it hugely. So when leading a diverse team of people with diverse needs, a servant leader does not expect them to all adjust themselves to suit him. In fact, the leader, takes initiative to be the type of leader that ministers, that meets individual developmental needs of their people. Often we've heard that this idea of servant leadership, given lip service, people say, yeah, servant leadership, but does it actually flow through to the actions? At Momenta and with Ken Blanchard, we take this very seriously. And this idea forms a foundation of our leadership philosophy on what a good leader is. Now, having been in leadership development for the past 20 years, one thing I've learned is that 2 or 3 day workshops on their own don't work. Now, this is a bit of a gutsy thing for me to say, considering the work that I do. But think about some of the leaders that you respect. What makes them good leaders? Now, the answers I've heard from hundreds of people that we've done workshops with are values, things like care for their team, commitment, character, integrity, their mindset, their perseverance. And unfortunately, these are not really qualities you learn from a workshop. There is a place for workshops, don't get me wrong, I'll come to that later. But there's so much in this that is not learned in a workshop. So built on the basis of servant leadership, based on the foundation of servant leadership, we've identified the what? 7 categories of leadership assets. So overlaying the why with the what. And the first thing that we have there is this idea of core values and mindset. And core values and mindset are brought together firstly with values. Is this idea of, it's a Japanese concept, ikigai. Sorry if there are Japanese people here and I've pronounced it wrongly. But it's a combination, it's a confluence of 4 areas: what you love, what you are good at, what you are being paid for, and what the world needs. The confluence of these 4 questions give you that purpose, that core purpose for what your life is about, what your core values can be. And then we look at this area of mindset. And there are books around. One is by Arbinger, where it talks about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. and then inward versus an outward mindset. So just to give you a very simple example, growth versus fixed is where a person with a growth mindset might say, oh man, I can't do this now. My team can't do this now. We don't have the capability to do this for now, but we can grow into it. The fixed mindset person would say, we don't have the capabilities. We can't do it. Let's not try and strive for this goal. It's just too far. It's too hard. It's not going to be practicable. Inward versus outward. An inward mindset person, the things that they do are all about themselves, all about my team, me, what are my needs, what are my priorities. An outward mindset person does everything they do for the benefit of other people. It's a very servant, very outward-looking mindset. So, as part of being a great leader, very key to this is what are their core values and mindset of this person. And it's something that needs to be looked at. The next area is natural gifts and strengths, which I accidentally went to just now. And here we looked at 4 areas of natural giftings and strengths. We all come out from our mother's womb different. And some people would like you to believe that anybody can be anything, can be everybody that they want to be. And to be honest, it's not true. I am never going to be Steve Vai. Maybe that shows that I don't have enough of a growth mindset. But it shows that I recognize my natural limitations. My first daughter was born in New Zealand. And you know, in New Zealand, there are the Pacific Islanders, the whites, and they're huge, right? They're all very big size people. They play world champion at rugby. And my wife and I, you know, average size Asian people, our daughter was born after every month she has to go and get weighed, and they'll see how tall is she, how's her development. And she's at the bottom 5% of all babies in her age. And we were a bit worried. How? So we brought the results, went to see the pediatrician. The pediatrician looked at it and looked at us, looked at the results. Bottom 5% looked at us, and then he laughed. So he wrote in the comments, this baby is fulfilling her genetic potential. So that's fine. And sometimes we need to know what our genetic potential is, not just physically, but in the personality, the gifts, who we have been created, designed to be. So 4 areas we look at: personality. We find Myers-Briggs quite an accessible, quite a very useful thing. I mean, there are so many personality tests out there, and for every personality test, you'll find people who hate them and people who love them. But one of the ones that we have found easy to use, easy to explain, is the Myers-Briggs. Natural aptitudes, we use StrengthsFinder, which is a world-recognized assessment from Gallup. And then for behavioral inclination, DISC is a good tool. For job role preferences, we use Belbin, which helps people identify what job roles they like to be in. So as a leader, if you've got your core values and mindset sorted, a bit of self-awareness, you understand your own natural giftings and your strengths. Add to that, I'm not going to go into this detail for the rest. Emotional intelligence, which is understanding yourself, how you're feeling, your emotional response to anything that's happening at the time. Relational influence, intelligence. So if emotional intelligence is EQ, then relational intelligence we call RQ. The ability to read what's happening around the table, around your boardroom table, around your project team. Sometimes guys, you know, this comes back to a bit of our makeup. Maybe guys don't seem to be very good at this. You know, somebody's going, hey, everybody happy? Everybody happy? Yeah, project, no problem. And then one of your team members saying, yeah, no problem. And then, okay, no problem, carry on. But actually, there's something that needed to be read in that response. Learning agility. Everybody has different stage or different levels of learning agility. The ability to take on, to integrate, and to assimilate new information. Functional competencies. Every job, if you're a leader in the army, we've got somebody from MINDEF here. We've got quite different functional competencies required. from if you are a leader in Oakwood, somebody else here as well. So if you're in defense versus whether you are in the hospitality industry, very different functional competencies. If you lead engineers or if you lead accountants, very different functional competencies. And finally, universal leadership competencies. These are competencies that apply across different industries. As long as you're working with people, these are important competencies to have. And so very often when we talk about leadership development, this last oval here is what people will zero in on. Sometimes we go into natural gifts and strengths, but most of the others, to be honest, get skipped over. So you see the breadth of what it takes to be a good leader. And you understand why I say 2 or 3 day workshops on their own don't work. They can't work because some of these assets are not built by trainings. Secondly, even the ones that are built by trainings are not assembled in any sort of intentional way of putting the elements together. So if you like leadership culture in your organization, it's like building a house. First, you start with the why of the house. Is it for a couple? Is it for a nuclear family of 4 people maybe? Or is it for an extended family of 15 people, grandfather, grandmother, auntie, uncle, everybody staying 3 generations all in one house? So that is the why. Then the what. What kind of house do you want? Do you want an inner city apartment? A Bukit Timah bungalow? Would you like a log cabin in the woods? Maybe Pulau Ubin? A terrace house in Senate Estate? You know, all also can. All also can be very nice. But all of them will need things like foundations, flooring, walls, columns, glazing, toilets, kitchen, ceiling, etc., etc. And in Singapore, we need aircon as well. So these are like the 7 leadership assets I've listed. You can have your house. The foundation of your house is servant leadership. And then each of these other elements are really important, essential parts of a leader's formation. So if we didn't realize that there are these different aspects of building leadership, we only know about engaging trainers to give motivational talks. It's like trying to build a house using only marble tiles. No wonder it keeps falling over. So sure, the Italian marble flooring is very nice, very beautiful, but what is missing in those houses of leadership culture is the rest of the building, the walls, the roof, the bathrooms, etc. So how do we start to put these various components together? We move from the why to the what to the how. Do we have to wait 10, 20, 30 years for people to start to gain the life experiences, the mindset, skills, etc. before they can be good leaders? Can someone only be a good leader after they have gray hair? To be honest, most of the great leaders we see around us were formed in that way over time, naturally, as life throws different challenges at us, either sink or swim. It wouldn't be false to say that in the past, most leadership formation has happened incidentally through natural life events. Steve Jobs, how many times would he have been wanting to give up while building this amazing company called Apple? From building the first computer to building the team, to building the company. Nelson Mandela, how many times would he have been so easy for him to give up when he was sitting there in prison for decades? Mother Teresa, living in the slums of Calcutta. At any time she could say, forget this, too hard, I'm going home. But they stayed there. And life took its time to throw all these things at them that developed their leadership. So looking at the journeys that many, many leaders have taken, we found that it is possible to shorten that time if we put in the elements intentionally by design. Firstly, you identify what needs to be built, then apply how these things have to be built. And we've identified 8 hows or modalities for leadership formation. So firstly, I'll go through these really quickly. Firstly, coaching. It's a hot topic for today. We all know what coaching is about. So in terms of getting people to do something, there's a spectrum of what you can do. You can go from directive telling, just tell, just shut up and do this, A, B, C, don't. On the other end of the spectrum, there is a very delegative style. There's a, okay, can you go build a house? I'll see you in 6 weeks or 6 months. Somewhere in between, there is this sweet spot of coaching where somebody is given goals, targets, tasks that they can understand, that are specific enough that they can understand, and they're helped along that journey, yet they're not being told what to do. So coaching is a unique skill that is coming up these days. Assessments, and we like to use formative assessments, not summative ones. Summative assessments are like your PSLE and your O-levels and your A-levels, where you go, you do the test, and then you get told what grade you get. Formative assessments are different. Formative assessments are designed so that you learn while you're doing the assessment. And then the assessment gives you feedback on how you can improve in the future. Trainings is what we usually talk about. Don't have to go into too much into this. I'll spend actually most of this session talking about this square later on. On-the-job assignments. On-the-job assignments refer to assignments that somebody may be given a job to do within the company that may be outside of something they have done in the past. So it's an opportunity for them to do new things, learn new stuff. Lectures, formal education. A lot of people take time out and go and do an MBA or an EMBA or your CPA, whatever it is these days. Initiatives is a little bit like assignments, but on a bigger scale. So initiatives talks about new projects, people leading up maybe a new development for a company that wasn't there before. Self-reflection and other reflection. So self-reflection talks about things like journaling, things like spending a bit of time quietly reflecting. So what have I learned in the past 2 weeks? What have I learned in the past 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. Having a leadership formation journal. So things like that where we help people to reflect and process and digest what they have learned. Other reflection talks about reflecting of other people. So this speaks of a learning community. If you've got people in leadership development and doing it on their own, they're just trudging up this hill on their own of learning how to be a leader, very, very tough. It's much more effective, much more effective when they're doing it in a small group of people. Those of you, we're talking to Singaporeans here. So I do webinars for people from different countries. And it's always nice doing it for Singaporeans because we have a lot of common experiences. When you do NS, you don't do, it's not a one-person BMT. You do it with your platoon, with your section. And people trudging through, going through tough times together, we all learn better together. That's about a learning community, self-reflection and other reflection. And then trials and tribulations. The magic is when you take all these things, CATALIS, all these things, and you apply the final T, trials and tribulations to it, and give people a slightly difficult time. And people grow through these times. And that is an amazing bit. So of these 8 that I've just gone through, just like with a variety of building materials that are needed when you build a house, there's also a variety of building techniques to use for each of those materials needed to build a house. So same with building leaders, we've identified firstly the why, which is to serve the needs of our people, a foundational philosophy of servant leadership. Secondly, the what, 7 assets that need to be built. Finally, the how, 8 modalities or 8 techniques employed to build these assets. Of these 8, the most visible one, the external consultants like us, we get brought in to work on is T, for trainings. So I'll talk about that a bit more shortly. But first, I want to emphasize that running trainings on their and workshops on their own, after 3 months, all that you will have left is a dusty workbook on the shelf and no behavioral change. We have learned this from 16 years Momenta, myself personally 20 years of developing leaders. Just going to workshops doesn't work long term. What really works is what we're bringing here today, is when you come in and we help to develop a complete leadership formation ecosystem. So it's not just leadership training, even leadership development, okay, maybe leadership building starts to get there. I really like the word leadership formation. It gives this idea of a much more holistic process and ecosystem, because it's not just one thing. You've got to build a whole bunch of things around it in order to develop really, really effective leaders. Sounds like a lot of work, but trust me, it is worth it, because leaders make all the difference in an organization. Even with training workshops, it works the best when you find a training provider whose, number one, their values you are aligned with. Then you know that all their workshops are designed along those same values. And your organization develops along the same values as that organization. So from a perspective of training, I'd like to introduce Ken Blanchard. So all of Ken Blanchard's books and training materials are designed in this way, and it's built on the foundation of high engagement, effective conversations, and servant leadership. This is why of all the training material out there as Momenta, we picked Ken Blanchard, because it's so in line with who we are as an organization. So for those who don't know, Dr. Ken, whose picture is shown here, has authored or co-authored over 60 books that have sold over 21 million copies since the 1960s. So this is an interesting YouTube video here. Ken Blanchard, Still Making History 2020. This is was a video done as a tribute for his 75th anniversary, 75th birthday. So if you're interested, you can go YouTube that, Ken Blanchard, Still Making History 2020. And his model of leadership has been continually refined and is today the most widely used in the world. It manages to achieve the holy trinity of leadership frameworks, i.e. it is research-based. So one of his first books was actually a university textbook. And so it's research-based, you can apply it and have confidence that it works. Number two is that it has been proven over time and across multiple cultures. Number three, it is easy to learn and put into practice. So there are no complicated frameworks or long lists of techniques to memorize. It's easy to learn, easy to use. Yeah, so if you're interested, a bit geeky, you can go have a look at that link. In fact, I'll copy and paste it into the chat. So you can just copy and paste it here. I'll put it in the chat, there you go. But don't watch it now, please. You can save to watch later. So I'm gonna highlight a few of the workshops which are available to give you an idea of how they all fit together. So firstly is SL2. SL2 is Blanchard's sort of flagship workshop. Contains a core model that most of the Ken Blanchard programs are anchored around. It's the most widely taught leadership model in the world. It's trained more than 5 million managers, decades of research, etc. And this is something I found really cool. The first time I heard about this, I myself was surprised when I first got involved with Ken Blanchard, that 2/3 of Fortune 500 companies are clients of Blanchard. Yeah, I think that's, in terms of proven track record, that speaks for itself. So SL2 and self-leadership are two workshops that we do, and it's built around this same framework. And the idea is that people progress, people develop in different stages as they get more and more competent in their job. So most people start at everybody starts at D1 or D2. D1 talks about low competence, high commitment. Imagine you start a job and you're like, wow, interesting. This first job, I've been applying for this, been trying to get it, and finally I got this, yay, excited, but don't know how to do it at all. D2 is where somebody, maybe they've started a job here. Maybe they got told, hey, can you do this? Not really, I'm a bit busy. I've got, sorry, nobody else to do. Can you please help? Okay lah. So the competence is not very high and the commitment is not very high too. You sort of got your arm twisted to do this job. D3 is where people are moving through and now they've got better competence. They've been doing it for a while. They'll know how to do the job generally, basically. But maybe the confidence not quite there. And then D4 is where you get somebody who's high competence and high confidence. And somebody like this can be incredibly effective at the job. And on the whole, they are a net contributor to the team. And so everybody, the science shows us that everybody goes through these stages. Some people regress a little bit, go forward, regress a little bit, whatever. But everybody goes through these 4 stages, D1, D2, D3, D4. What SL2 does is that it gives us a tool, a way that we can diagnose somebody. Are you a D1, D2, D3, or D4? Some of us know this sort of, you know, you get a feel for it. But SL2 gives us a confirmed, you know, sort of a tool where there's no question, yes, you're a D2, maybe moving on to D3, but still D2. And this is how I need to lead you. This is the sort of leadership you need. If you're a D3, this is the sort of leadership you need. If you're a D4, this sort of leadership you need. And so these are the S1 for D1. S stands for leadership style. D stands for developmental level. So S1 works with D1, S2 works with D2, S3 works with D3, S4 works with D4. And so from a leadership perspective, the skills there are, number one, goal setting. How do you set a person's goals so that they are SMART, smart, right? We all heard about SMART goals, but the SL2 SMART goals are slightly different from the normal SMART goals, and it makes quite a bit of difference. So firstly, goal setting. Secondly, diagnosing. Is this person D1, D2, D3, or D4? Thirdly, matching. How do you match your leadership style? How do you match your conversation with this person to meet their need? And the goal is to get everybody from D1, whether they start off at D1 or D2, get them to D4 as quickly as possible so that they can be highly competent and highly confident at their job. And then if you approach it from a self-leadership mindset perspective, okay, basically self-leadership is to help individual contributors, the non-leaders, to self-diagnose, to look at their goal. Is my goal smart? Is my goal effective? Is my goal gonna work? And then what is my developmental level at this goal, at this task? And so what sort of leadership do I need? And so how do I ask for this sort of leadership? And it can be very powerful when these two come together in an organization. People from outside organization will look there and wonder, what language are you talking? Because you hear things like, hey boss, I'm a D2 in this, can you help me? And when he said, I'm a D2 at this, immediately the boss knows what to do. Or somebody might say, hey boss, I'm a D4 at this, it's okay. The boss immediately knows, oh, okay, so you are, you're self-diagnosing to be highly competent and high commitment. If I agree with you, wonderful, great. Carry on. If I don't agree with you, then there's a conversation about aligning what the boss's diagnosis is and what the individual contributor's diagnosis is. So I'd like to give you a free ebook. I'm going to stick it in the chat. I'm going to try and drag and drop it. It's called "Is a Lack of Self-Leadership Derailing Your Organization?" So I'm popping into the chat now. So same as before, it's available there in the chat, and we'll leave the chat open for a few minutes after the end of this talk so that you can then go and download everything. So please try not to, I know you're very excited, but try to hold off reading that for now. So SL2 and self-leadership are two handmaidens that really go together and can be very, very powerful in shifting the leadership culture of an organization. So SL2, the second one I want to talk about is coaching essentials. I'm not going to go too much into this. We talked about coaching before. It's generally accepted to be a very good compromise in sort of the leadership methods of today. But do we really know how to do it? Very often, people have gone through training, left, and haven't carried it out. Coaching Essentials gives us the process. So the process model, talk about initially connect, focus, activate, review. 4-step process. Some people use GROW. Some people, I mean, there are quite a few different models for coaching. On top of that, the Ken Blanchard Coaching Essentials goes through these 4 skills. One is learning to listen. How do we listen? How do we listen well? We talk about active listening, all that kind of stuff. Inquire for insight. How do we ask questions? What are some questions to ask? What questions turn people off? What questions open the door for people to share? How do we tell your truth? Because your coachee's truth may not be the truth. So you also want to have a way to share your truth, the way you see it. Express confidence. So these are the 4 skills that are taught in Coaching Essentials. These are then applied and practiced during the workshop. However, how will you ensure that this culture actually takes root in your organization? See, the problem with coaching and a lot of other coaching, I've been to different coaching courses, is that it sounds like a great idea during the training, but when people try to do it for real, it is unnatural, it is awkward, it is weird, and we give up too quickly. So we never see the results. It's a bit like starting an exercise routine. Some people here are on a diet, we want to lose weight. So the first few workouts, man, it's hard, but we need to push through, right? So this is where the other parts of the ecosystem come in, where you implement a coaching rhythm. So after people have done a coaching course, there's a coaching rhythm. There are coaches for coaches to check that the coaches are coaching their people. So leaders are, in a way, forced to endure through, to push through the first 5 or 6 or 7 awkward coaching conversations because they know their boss is going to ask them about it. Their own coach is going to ask them about it until they start getting comfortable with it and they start seeing the benefits, and then people can be released. Even then, to have a set coaching rhythm is very, very useful. So the next workshop here is on legendary service. Legendary service is hinged around the mindset that all of us are serving one another. Whether it's internal, whether it's external customers, so you're serving an external customer, you want to see them, give them good service. That's everybody, that's the natural way people think. But also to see other parts of your organization as customers, as internal customers, that we want to provide legendary service. So the framework for legendary service is care. It's about showing customers that you care about them. So the workshop goes through these 4 stages as well, where you committed, you identify your customers, they align their beliefs, their vision. What is their customer service vision is what they come out of this section of the workshop. Their self-articulated customer service vision. And then attentive. How do we be present? How are we going to be present? How are we going to be other focused? Remember, we talked about being outward focused. How are we going to be focused on other people? Drawing out information, confirming what you heard, listening, questioning skills. This is where it comes in. Talk about being responsive to our clients, to our customers, whether internal or external, acknowledging feelings, offer solutions, gaining agreement, etc., responding to challenging situations. So this objections, how do we respond? And then for you personally to be empowered, practicing self-care. How do you take care of yourself as a person? And then how do you use this idea of care to champion your customers internally as well? So that's what legendary service. That's what legendary service is about. Leading people through change is another very topical and getting more so. Did you know that 70% of change initiatives fail around the world, through organizations around the world, resulting in unmet business results, wasted time, low productivity, etc., etc. And if you look at our world today, the consequences of failure to change can quite realistically be the end of the organization. If you don't change, if you don't go from face-to-face to virtual, what's your organization going to be like? You won't survive. Change is no longer about getting ahead. Change now, today, is about survival. So research shows that 70% of change efforts fail because of these reasons. Concerns are not surfaced. Not enough people are involved right from the start. A few people at the top are making all the decisions about change, and then they just say, "All of you do this, 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 this," and so there's no buy-in. Because of that, there's no urgency. There's no business case. A compelling vision that communicates that the end state is lacking. That communicates the end state of the change is lacking. And then systems aren't aligned with the change. Somebody says, "Hey, we're going to be all like this in 2 years." But you've got all these processes and systems that need to adapt and change, and all that takes time. So LPTC, leading people through change, is quite long. We call it LPTC. Firstly, identifies the stages of concern when an organization is undergoing change. Firstly, informational concern, personal concern, implementation concern. So this is at the bottom. I'll just stamp. Yep, it's at the bottom here. So it identifies the stages of concern when an organization is undergoing change. Then it gives us the strategies to use to address these concerns as we go through the change process. Does this look familiar? Back a few slides ago, we looked at the SL2, the leadership framework, and it looks the same. Not just the colors, but the framework is quite similar. And it's because these two frameworks have been birthed out of the same philosophy that good leadership, whether it's task leadership or it's change leadership, is defined by meeting the needs of our people at the time. So for an organization that is already living, breathing, talking SL2, for them to adopt LPTC is a breeze because people are already familiar with the mindset. We're just helping them to apply it to different circumstances. Okay, so LPTC looks at these different stages. So for example, at the stages of this change, tipping point, kickoff, go live, tipping point, and the type of activity that needs to be done to address people's concerns at the time. Informational and personal concerns, we need to frame the change. We need to start to build the messaging around the change. During mention, where from building the messaging and strengthen it, impact, refinement, etc. So LPTC takes an organization through the whole change process. And with change processes, quite often there is a change management plan, but there isn't a people management plan for the change. And that is so key because it's all about the people at the end of the day. Just two more to share with you. One is management essentials. Really briefly, this management essentials historically is our third most popular workshop after SL2 and self-leadership. Management essentials, let me get rid, okay, management essentials. Okay, management, sorry, I'm getting distracted with the annotation. I'll stop annotating. The next, management essentials is really for entry-level leaders, people who are being appointed first time into a management role. This is a great thing for them to do. It's based on Ken Blanchard's best-selling book, the 1 Minute Manager. Now there's been released a new 1 Minute Manager, and the key statement from there is that managing is done minute by minute in a series of conversations. So there are some big high-level concepts and frameworks, but there's also the micro stuff. And if you get the micro stuff, the skills to do the micro stuff right, it builds up into your big management competency. So 4 key conversations that new managers need to have with their people: goal setting conversations, praising, redirecting, and wrapping up. And then there are 4 essential skills: listening, listen to learn, inquire for insight, tell your truth, and express confidence. So again, if you notice, the 4 essential skills here are the same as the 4 essential skills in coaching essentials. They just apply it in a different area. Again, this reflects that the same core philosophies are just expressing themselves in different ways. And this is how you build a coherent leadership culture where common values, your core values show up again and again, and people know what to expect from their leaders. So finally, all this leadership frameworks, self-leadership, SL2, change leadership, service culture, etc. The glue that holds all this together is trust. In a marital relationship, you can be the most handsome, the most pretty, the richest, most talented, charming couple, but no love, no talk, right? If you walk into Daimler, we've got somebody from Daimler today. I was about to say cycle and carriage, but we've got Daimler here. If you walk into Daimler, the Daimler showroom, my friend, no money, no talk. If you want to have a healthy leadership culture in any organization, you can have the most fancy framework, processes, methodologies, but no trust, no talk. Studies show that high trust organizations experience 50% less turnover. Committed, engaged employees who trust their leaders perform much better and are less likely to leave the organization. People who trust their leaders, they want to perform at higher levels. They use discretionary effort. They remain with the organization longer. They endorse the organization, and they are good organizational citizens. So they are more quiet. They'll listen to you when you ask them to do something. But tragically, a study that's been done show that 82% of people say that they don't trust their boss to tell the truth. Now, when I first read this, it hit me. I was like, Moses, do you trust your leader? If you trust your leader, chances are there are people under you and you are the one that is not trusted. And that's painful because 82% of people say that they don't trust their bosses to tell the truth. 45% of employees say lack of trust in leadership is the biggest issue impacting work performance. So how do we build trust? This comes back to what we talked about before, core values mindset. But then also, how do we express the core values? Sometimes the core values mindset are there. The boss wants the best for the people. Really, all that's good. But they're just not communicating it right. So lack of trust in an organization comes at a high price. All these things, the opposite of high trust, basically. But building trust is as simple as A, B, C, and D. Firstly, demonstrate your competence. Able, are you able? Through expertise, through results, through effectiveness. Secondly, believable. Are you believable? Do you act with integrity? Honesty, show your set of values. Fairness, connected. Are you dependable? So this workshop goes through these four and gives us very, very practical ways to work out how we are going to express these four, A, B, C, D. And when we express these four, personally, we build trust with our team. If our organization as a whole express these four through our messaging to the rest of the market, we build trust as an organization. So very powerful little tools that are there. So all these Blanchard, so we just talked about this whole idea of a leadership formation ecosystem. There are more, coaching options, assessment options, training options, etc., which are available. But these are the ones that I've pulled up to share with you today. And just for a quick overview of all the processes, the learning process of this. So all Blanchard programs go through 4 stages of launch, learn, practice, master. So usually launch happens before the workshop. Master happens after the workshop. Learn and practice is what happens during the workshop. And we focus on the practice. Learn a few tools and practice, apply them. Get good at actually using them. Components which are outside the workshop, for example, launch and the master, are supported by Blanchard Exchange, which is a learning platform that we have, that you have access to when you sign up with Ken Blanchard. You'll be given access for 12 months. So for example, this is the launch part of SL2. And so if you launch, you start off with a self-assessment, SMART goals video, a worksheet, fitness test, and then you've got your session materials. And then you go through the learn, practice, master, etc. During the session, all the materials are available there on Blanchard Exchange. So we save trees and don't have to print so much stuff. And then at the end of the session, the master is after your session where you go home and 70% of the learning occurs. And so there's a whole bunch of resources, material, master tools, which are there to help you inculcate and your teams inculcate what has been taught. Another tool we have is the SL2 app. So this is a mobile app, runs on Android and iPhones. And it goes through and gives us these tools on how to use the SL2 model. How do we assess somebody? Am I going to assess somebody I lead? So that will be for SL2. Or am I assessing myself on a particular task? So that will be for self-leaders. Goes through, asks you a few questions on your knowledge, your commitment to the task, and then gives you very key tools on how we can apply the correct leadership style for this person, for this task. So all the modalities, these are the delivery modalities, all the Blanchard programs can be offered either live in person or live virtual. So we'll go through this really quickly. Overall 7 leadership assets. This is something that Momenta does. And we deal with all the leaders across the organization. It's usually a 12-month engagement, consulting engagement, where we help each individual leader to work out their personal leadership formation journey. And a key thing to take away from here is that it is personal. There are some things where people will come together and there are similarities, but each person's journey is different from somebody else. And they will be learning things, they will have learnings applied to them personally. And this from the catalyst modality, the various assets, the 7 assets. And then SL2 is mainly for leaders. It's a 2-day, SL2. Live in person is 2 days. Virtual is 5 times 2-hour sessions, usually across 2.5 days. Coaching essentials, we've got, it's mainly for leaders. It's a 1-day thing for 1-day workshop live, or 3 2-hour sessions across 1.5 days. So 2 sessions, 1 day, 1 session on the last day. LPTC, leading people through change. We've got various levels of this because change affects different levels of the organization. So for senior execs, it's a 4-hour session, introducing to them the idea, the thinking behind LPTC. Then for actual leaders of people and change leaders, it's a 1-day workshop. Individual contributors, also 1-day workshop. And so for the leaders and individual contributors, this can be done as a series of 2-hour virtual sessions as well. Management essentials, remember this is for new leaders, people are just coming up into a leadership role. The live in person is 1 day and virtual is 3 2-hour workshops. Self-leadership is for individual contributors, again 1 day, 2 and 3 2-hour workshops. Building trust, legendary service, these are the modalities, the formats which are there. Something I want to highlight here is this. Under self-leadership, sometimes, quite often, companies have a budget for leaders to do leadership development, but the budget for individual contributors is much lower. We understand that. What we also offer is on-demand e-learning. So basically, they sign up for, it's a 6-week, mostly online material. So they go through, and each week there are a bunch of readings, exercises, videos, and then once a week there's a 45-minute virtual session where they all come together. It's a virtual overview, a bit of teaching for the next week, and then they go into next week's session. So this is for self-leadership. It's 6 weeks of this material. And the management essentials and SL2 versions for this 6-week online is currently being akan datang. It's currently being formulated. So it's something that we can all look forward to. well, I look forward to. So I've talked quite a bit about training now, but just want to balance it out. Trying to develop leadership just by training is like trying to develop, to grow a seed in just fertilizer. You get a lot of excitement initially, but no sustainable growth. For a plant to survive, you need a whole ecosystem. You need soil. In leadership formation, this is the real life people, real life projects, assignments that people are given, that a leader is operating amongst. Secondly, plants need sunlight. Growing leaders need coaching to illuminate any blind spots or areas for improvement. Plants need water. Growing leaders need a community of people on a similar journey that keeps them motivated and refreshed. Plants need pruning. Leadership growth needs trials and tribulations. Can be painful at first, but catalyzes growth. Only then you add fertilizer to help the plant to grow faster, stronger, and in specific intentional areas. Just like training workshops for a growing leader.